one thinks is right is not always the same as what others think is right. No one can always be right. Roy T. Bennett. 28 days later. Hello, everyone, and welcome back, baby boys and girls. I am Zachary Ballard.
And I am Chris Vlamakis.
The wacky Vlamakis, the best Greek guy I know.
Sure, I guess.
Yo, this is my boy Chris. He's, introduce yourself.
Yeah, I have many years of experience in certain things.
Cool. Nice to meet you, Chris, even though I've known you for like 4 years now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, about 4 years, 5 years maybe. Real quick before we start the episode, I did put trigger warnings in the descriptions for each episode. I forgot to verbally say them. I also put trigger warnings in the description for the whole podcast. I did want to mention a trigger warning, a little bit on suicide and a lot on rape and sexual assault. We will be talking about these issues and these things, so I will let you know before we start to talk about them, and you can skip past those parts if you need to, and just listen to the rest of the episode. But fair warning, there's some triggering stuff we will be talking about in this episode, and especially throughout the rest of the series. So, without further ado, let's get started. We're going over 28 days later. Throughout this whole podcast, I'm going to be doing seasons of TV shows, and in between, like, quarter seasons and half seasons. And after I finish the season, I will be going over movies. So it's not just The Walking Dead. I'm going to be going over a lot of zombie content besides The Walking Dead. So you can look forward to more episodes like this where we talk about movies. I'm going to talk about video games as well. So just so you guys are aware that that's what's going to be happening. And then after we get the next 3 episodes of Walking Dead done, then Chris is going to come back and we'll do 28 Weeks Later, which is the sequel to this movie.
Yeah, 2002 Danny Boyle movie.
Yeah.
That kind of really set the tone for a lot of modern just zombie horror fiction. I think it really, before those movies, you didn't really get a whole lot of, well, a lot of people would call fast zombies or runners. Then right after this movie came out, you started seeing a huge trend towards that in movies, video games, TV shows, all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And so this movie actually really, I think they set out, and it was, if you watch it, it's filmed in a way that makes it seem like it was really low budget. But some of the cinematography shots and the way they do extras in it and everything like that really makes it sing. Yeah.
Yeah, I found it so interesting because, like, I really do think that having fast zombies definitely creates a whole different world and a whole different aspect within the zombie genre because, and it kind of goes into what I thought the main theme was, which is, like, the juxtaposition of hope and no hope.
Yeah. Can I add one little thing first? Also, this isn't, a lot of people will watch it and sometimes nitpick, it isn't 100% an like traditional zombie movie. The people are infected, just like zombies, and they turn into bloodthirsty, mindless creatures, just like zombies. But the movie very much states that they are technically alive. Still, they're very much like, if you damage their brain enough or like damage an internal organ enough, they could bleed out, they could die as well. But that's really the only difference. It's pretty much a zombie movie after that.
The zombies are incredibly different, and they are, like, they're still alive, and that's one thing that if you have fast zombies, they tend to have them still be alive.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, there are some cases where, at least if you read the book World War Z, where it talks about if you were athletic in real while you were alive and then turned into a zombie, then you were a faster zombie. In the same sense where it's like if you were a bodybuilder or a really big guy, then you were harder to take down.
Yeah, for sure. But it's kind of interesting because you kind of have to, like, because in The Walking Dead you can excuse it. You can be like, they're dead. They're not actual people because they already died. But in this, it's like they're sick. They're just sick people, and it's kind of interesting because you would think that people would care about sick people more, but we learned in this last year that people don't really care about sick people.
I guess you can get political about it. True. It is kind of just begs the question, what would you do? Because the namesake of the movie, 28 Days Later, is the main character wakes up after being something familiar from The Walking Dead.
Yeah, kind of like Rick.
But predates The Walking Dead is that this character wakes up after being in a hospital in a coma, and while he early stages of that coma, this outbreak happened. But it begs the question, like, what would a society do? What could they do if, like, because, like, it's not even just biting. Like, if you get in contact with their saliva, if you get in contact with their blood,
any bodily fluid,
you have literally less than a minute before you turn into a literal rage-filled. Like, they describe it as more of a rage-filled thing.
Yeah, like kind of like rabies.
Yeah,
they don't mention rabies, but
but in the sense where it's like it happens, it spreads so quickly, and like no way to cultivate or to figure out, hey, is there a way for us to counter this? Because not only is it like infecting people, those people are killing other people. And so what do? You defend yourself, and then possibly in the midst of defending yourself, you get infected, and then it's just a big chain reaction.
Yeah.
That's kind of one of those things. It's also in an area where the movie takes place in London, in the United Kingdom, where for forever there's been a lot stricter gun regulations and stuff too. Because one of the big jokes I always make is like, if a zombie outbreak happened in like southern Georgia, everybody in the neighborhood would pull out their guns and it'd probably be taken care of pretty easily.
Yeah.
Like, that's one of my things. Unless like it was in the water supply somehow or airborne, then you can't fight it. But like most of the people in the movie, you get introduced to some soldiers. They're the first people in the movie that you see that actually have guns. And that's also something you have to think about. It's like, if you are fighting somebody, one of these things off with like a baseball bat, and you hit somebody over the head, more likely than not, some of their blood's going to get onto you. And can you guarantee?
I mean, like, they, in The Walking Dead, they freaking rub it over
They use that as a thing to be like, oh, we're going to hide ourselves. But in this movie, literally, if you thought about doing that, you're pretty much dead at that point.
Yeah. Well, like, I had the thought that it would be so much harder to differentiate zombies from humans. And we see that a little bit in the movie, because sort of towards the end, she thinks that he's turned.
Yeah, the main character goes basically Rambo on a bunch of the bad guys you meet towards the end of the movie. And because of what they've done or what they were attempting to do, he basically has to fight and beat a man to death.
Yeah.
And he does it in a very violent way, because there was really no other way he could do it.
Yeah.
Because the dude was also trying to beat him to death.
Yeah.
And so he stands up and she's like, "Oh my God, what do I do?" And I'm like, if it was me in that scenario, I would have accidentally killed a bitch.
Yeah, I mean, it's so fascinating, because I saw a lot where it was like the difference between human rage and like zombie rage, and how can you tell the difference, and what's like the difference? Because the guy, the general guy, he mentions that before it was people killing people, and now it's still people killing people. Like, nothing has changed.
It is one of those things where there's a lot of, with the theme of pretty much zombie movies ever since their main inception in the 70s and 80s with the Night of the Living Dead and movies like that, where the movie has a subtext of like, who is the real enemy in this? Who's the real monster? Is it these mindless undead creatures following base instincts, or is it the humans that, once you take away their livelihood, once you take away like sense of society and reason, like, are they who's actually worse?
Yeah. And
like he makes a great point. Chris Eccleston in that role actually was very poignant to make all those points, and saying that like, I've been years in the military. I've killed people a lot of times before, and now it's just like, well, now I'm killing a lot more.
Yeah.
And then it describes like one of the first characters that you meet. He talks about how he lost his family, and it was a mob of people trying to get out of the country on airplanes, and that he was looking into the crowd, knowing there were infected in there, but you couldn't tell the difference.
Yeah, and that's so freaking
because
scary.
Everybody was angry.
Because it happened so fast.
Yeah, everybody was angry. Everybody was a mob mentality, fighting each other, whether they were infected or not. And so that would be crazy. Yeah,
like, it would be so hard to tell, because you don't know, except for the red eyes, but from a distance you can't really tell.
True. And when people are panicked or have been crying or under duress, that stuff happens to them a lot of times. Their eyes get bloodshot, they start screaming and acting incoherent and everything. So yeah.
And I liked how they said when it started off as like riots, and then they realized it was like a disease.
Yeah.
They thought it was just people rioting, protesting or whatever, but then they were like, oh shoot, this is just a disease, and it happened so quickly that it would just be impossible. And I wanted to delve into that. I think they declined so much more quickly than in other zombie media.
Yeah, 28 days.
Yeah. Well, they declined so much more quickly because they had to. They had to decline their humanity.
Yeah.
I think because it happened so fast.
True. Nobody is calm, cool, and collective in this movie.
No, they're like...
Like, if you see a calm person in this movie, they're about to do something messed up. Like, or they've done something messed up.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the general even says, he's like... have you killed anyone? And because I know you wouldn't be here if you hadn't.
Yeah.
And it's just crazy because they had to decline so quickly because the virus moves so quickly.
Mm-hmm. And it's like very poignant because it shows a lot of pretty heartbreaking imagery.
Mm-hmm.
Like the main character gets taken to his family home.
Yeah.
And like some zombie medium will be like, oh, he goes into the home and he finds a zombie or a zombified family member, or no family members, they're just blood or something, everything like that.
Mm-hmm.
But it turns out he just goes there and he finds his two parents, and they decided to end it their own way.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of having to go through that, while with deep sadness and in their heart knowing that they had to abandon their son in a hospital bed.
Mm-hmm.
While on another hand, there's just like oh well, just basic human stuff. When some of the characters meet each other, you meet a father and a daughter, and you see that relationship, and it helps the two other main characters like regain a little bit of that humanity until something messed up happens to them.
Mm-hmm.
That probably happened to millions of other people.
Yeah.
And then you see where it shows about his first real kill of one of those, where he walks into a diner and there's an infected child. And there's nothing he can do for this child, but if he lets it live, it's going to kill either him or someone else.
Yeah.
And so it kind of does it mostly off screen,
mm-hmm.
but it like when he does that and he comes out and it's just like, yeah, he had to do this because there was literally no other way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, but like when her friend got bit, she just immediately killed him, and that surprised me because in other zombie media I've seen, it was like, okay, let's tie him up. Let's take care of him. We'll be with him while he's dead.
There's like 10 minutes at least of something. Or they're like, oh, he just got bit, chop off the body of his body.
That's what I thought she was doing at first. I thought, because it showed like the arm come off, and I thought that's what she was doing. I was like, okay,
they say
act fast.
In the movie, it's like you have 10 to 30 seconds before you turn. There is no
way.
way.
That virus is fast,
they have no way.
Like COVID at least had 2 days, that's fast, bro. Yeah. That's the fastest virus, and it just brings a whole new level to like, this is life or death. Mm-hmm. Like so much, it's so much higher of a risk with this zombie virus, and I thought they did it really well. At first, I was kind of wondering, like, why are they declining so quickly?
Yeah,
I'm like, it's because it's the virus. They're adapting to it. I wanted to mention the relationship between the father and the daughter, and then the two main characters' relationships, because like you said, they started to regain some of their like you said, they started to regain some of their humanity as they were hanging with them, and I just thought it was interesting because she was completely gone. Like her whole thing was survival.
Yeah, and he was literally like 2 days into the whole thing because he just woke up, and then they find these two who they need each other in different ways. The dad and the daughter needs these two people to help them actually survive a transit, and the Jim and Selena need them because it's like, here's some actual like relationship and humanity that's still there. Like they were obviously very hurt. They were obviously kind of probably on the edge of stuff, especially since they insinuated that the mother died recently.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird because you can interpret that the mother died recently right before the infection happened or as the infection happened.
Yeah.
You can interpret it as both. Either way, the mother recently died and they are just running out of resources and clinging. They are clinging to hope while Jim's kind of in the middle ground being like, should I be hopeful? Should I be cynical? And Selena is just like, no, the best thing we can do is just fight and live until the next day.
Yeah, we saw two sides of the spectrum where she's just like, survival is most important. But then the father and daughter are like, they're being silly with each other, they're still celebrating Christmas, and
Merry Christmas.
Yeah, Merry Christmas. But they're still celebrating Christmas, they're still being goofy and silly, like she drifts the car, and it's so you just really see two sides of the spectrum of still retaining that humanity, but we also need to survive. And also the father was trying to find civilization, and the woman was just day to day. We need to survive day to day, which is interesting because it's, we meet so many people that have that mentality in their own lives. Like, we meet people that are sometimes too silly like us.
It's kind of interesting because like original zombie movies, like the George Romero movies, Night of the Living Dead, kind of were a talk about consumerism and stuff like that, and the real zombies are just the consumers out there. And like consumerism also makes a lot of like when I worked at Walmart, there were just days where it's just like, okay, get through this day and get to the next one, get through this day and get to the next one. Some of them were horrible, some of them were okay. And it was, and that's kind of like that can happen too. But also on the other end, it's like there's people out there that like every single person experiences loss, experience hardships. Some more sporadic, or some very close together. And sometimes it's just like literally the best thing you can do is like, okay, get to the next day. Get to the next day. Hopefully you don't have to say that every day, because it isn't. In that case, you aren't literally trying to survive. Well, I guess in some cases you kind of are, depending on how hard it hits you. But
yeah, for sure. I want to talk about. I want to talk about kind of the stupid things they did, because they
people did, or the writing.
The people did, and the characters did, because they did some stupid things that I don't think anyone.
I think also you have to take some of this stuff with a grain of salt, of being like, we as a culture are so inundated with like survival and like horror movies that it's like, obviously those guys are idiots.
Yeah.
Like when I'm watching a TV show and it's just like, you fool, why are you going in there by yourself? But who knows? When people are, I just want everyone to think about this. When people are panicked, when it's a high stress situation, sometimes you don't make the most reasonable decisions.
Yeah, I'm mainly talking about when he goes into the church and he sees like the mountain of dead bodies.
Well,
and he's just like, hello?
He doesn't, but here's the thing.
I understand he doesn't know, but it's like I don't know. I just thought that was very
the one point in that scene where I was just like, you need to get out of there. Whereas like the infected priest shows up.
Yeah.
And like if any person like appears in a hallway and starts doing that and coming at you,
I'm running.
Like, run.
Yeah.
Like, don't just stand there being like, Father, are you okay? I'm like, no, he's not. He's obviously not. Okay. Why are you asking these questions?
Yeah.
He's not. And then he uses the one weapon he has, which is a bag full of soda cans, which probably hurts if you get hit by it.
Yeah.
And the guy's still down. He's like, looks at him for a second and then stays there. I'm like, you idiot, run.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing I want to talk about was the freaking tunnel. That was such a dumb move.
That's the most zombie movies of a horror survival plot point in the entire movie.
Yeah.
Because it's like they literally stop before this. For people who haven't seen it, they're traveling in this car and they stop before this tunnel, which would normally be the most direct route for them to go to this place. I believe multiple miles north of London. But you can tell from the mouth of the tunnel that there's multiple crashed cars in it and there's no electricity, so the tunnel's completely dark. They even mention that it's like, well, we could do an indirect route, but then basically they're like, nah, fuck it, and they drive into this, and like 2 minutes into their adventure into driving to this tunnel, they basically hit a roadblock of cars that they somehow, weirdest moment, like taking you out of the movie moment, is that they somehow were able to jump part of the cars and drive onto them.
Yeah, it was weird.
The car they're driving perfectly fine until the very end, and then one tire gets popped in the middle of this tunnel. They get past the roadblock, and then it's like, well, I guess we gotta change the tire. And I'm like,
but this could have been avoided. But the dad wouldn't listen. He was like so dead set on going through this damn tunnel.
Yeah, and anybody is just like, okay, this is a very obvious attempt to put in another moment of high suspension contention.
Yeah.
Because like it is freaky because like if something is making weird loud noises down the end of the tunnel, you hear them well before you see them.
Yeah.
And so they're hearing them, and then they start going, and they're like, quickly, get the tire on, and it's like, okay, this is a high stress situation, but this is one of the moments where it's like they are stupid because they wanted another, like, I bet part of me thinks about they probably were in some original writing room and they were like, well, it's been like 30 minutes and something like crazy high octane has happened. Let's shove something in here.
Yeah.
In between the point when they start driving from the grocery store to the point where they get gas. And it's like, yeah, be pretty interesting, take a tunnel. Get this man a promotion.
Got it. Get this man a freaking Oscar. Writing Oscar. Easy money. Yeah, I just wanted to mention that because I just don't think anyone with brains would do that.
But again, it's just like, I guarantee that, like, if you are a bullheaded, a pig-headed person, and you're like, we're going this way, like, I guarantee that could very well happen in real life. As silly as it may seem to somebody who's out of the situation and looking at it as a third person logical, like, that person is just like, well, this is the fastest way. This will take like an extra day if we go around.
Yeah.
You also live an extra day, man. It's like...
Yeah, I did want to talk about when he died, because he lost it. He lost it, and he gave up so quickly. Yeah. And I think that in this universe, it's so easy to give up hope, and especially with the type of virus it is.
It was interesting, because his character, like, you get introduced to him, and he's wearing a SWAT outfit, and he beats the crap out of some of these guys. And he takes the SWAT off, and he's just like,
he's like,
you guys want some
British
tea?
Guy,
And he's just this lighthearted, goofy British guy who's with his daughter and everything like that. And the whole movie, he's fairly lighthearted. He's kind of turns it because he's an older guy. He kind of, and the two main actors, I believe, are in their at least early 20s.
Yeah.
And so he's kind of a pseudo father figure to them. And he's just so funny and lighthearted. But when they get to their destination where the radio broadcast said to go, and there's no one there, he's immediately like angry, swearing, because he's like, this was an actual bastion of hope.
Yeah.
The first that they've had in a month, which like in some cases doesn't seem like a lot of time, but like when you literally are just like sitting in your apartment hoping to God that you'll survive to the next day, I bet 28 days is an eternity.
Yeah.
And then
I mean, also
they had to ration water. They had to literally use a bathroom in a bucket.
The zombies could crawl across the barricades. Like these zombies are the most dexterous I've ever seen. Yeah,
definitely.
You know, and they're smart too.
Yeah, and they were basically almost out of, like, they were rationing water for like a while, and he loses hope, and then gets really angry at everyone, and then unfortunately, spoiler if you haven't seen a 19-year-old movie, he unfortunately through a series, also a slight bout of anger, because there's this some blood from a hanging dead body gets into his face, and he starts immediately turning right after he's able to apologize and say he loves his daughter, and basically is like, get the fuck away from me.
Yeah.
And that's when we're introduced to the soldiers at that point.
And if he just would have stuck out a little bit longer, he could have lived, you know?
But would he... How much longer would he have lived, though? That's the question. Because, like, he would have been a direct interference, because the soldiers would have... We'll talk about the soldiers in a little bit, but what the soldiers were trying to do, they were going to do no matter how many men were with them.
Yeah.
And this, like, middle-aged... I mean... This middle-aged British...
He might have died, but he might have not, you know?
Who knows?
Yeah.
He might have been taken out to that shooting range with the one sergeant and Jim.
Yeah.
And I don't know.
Yeah, you don't
I
know.
don't think he would have been able to scale a wall like Jim. I'm just going to say, he was... Unfortunately, he didn't seem like the most physically fit man.
No. I wanted to talk about that sugar was the only food that they could find.
Yeah.
Which I think is interesting. Until they get to the grocery store, then they can get like canned foods and stuff. I wonder if that would be the case.
Well, I can imagine, because it's like, I bet in a wave of panic that a lot of people would prioritize food that is like advertised to be long lasting, like canned foods and stuff like that. But like they're first held up in like a small like mall convenience store. And if you go into those stores, they don't really have any nutritional food in there. They might have a fridge that has like milk and orange juice in it, and maybe some like pre-made sandwiches.
Yeah.
Like you go in there and it's mainly carbonated drinks and candy. And so it's like, if society gets wiped out before somebody manages to break in and get into those places, that's what you have to survive on. Like you're just eating pounds and pounds of chocolate. Like I can only.
And it would be so much harder to survive on that.
Yeah, after a couple of days, your body would be like weaned.
Well, he was passing out on the stairs.
Well, he was passing out because like I think also like
he was also wounded. Well, he was wounded.
He woke up in the hospital and like he looked malnourished and everything. And the first thing he had to really eat in like 4 weeks, other than IV fluid, was a can of soda he found on the ground. Yeah. And there was a ton of like. I think what's really interesting when it shows that food is like a lot of people depict that like everywhere and everything is barren. Yeah. But like if something hits a metropolitan area fast enough and like everyone's escaping and everything like that, there's going to be a ton of things abandoned. They go to a grocery store and the entire grocery store is like basically still there.
Yeah. And if it acts fast enough, like people aren't going to have time to loot. People aren't going to have time to go to Walmart and a lot of people, take all the toilet paper. And are they going, like if they manage to escape the city, are they going to just go back into the heart of the city to... What? Do they have means of carrying? Do they have a truck so they can get a truckload of food? Yeah. And can they guarantee that they even get there? Yeah. Like, that's an interesting topic that I think a lot of zombies, like, all the movies are like, oh, well, we're lacking our resources. We're growing our own crops and everything like that. Obviously, it's only 28 days into it. It takes a while to get there. Yeah, it takes a while to get there. You need to form a community of survivors. You need to do so much. That's true. So this is showing a very immediate after effect. Not saying that every single store, like, if they had gone to that store a year after, like, that store would have anything in it. It probably may have some stuff in it, but a lot of it, more of it, would be more rotten and everything. Yeah. I mean, it's so interesting to me because, you know, I like to say that I would be a survivor in a zombie apocalypse. I'd die. But like, well, especially with our American diet, like a lot of people, they eat a lot of carbs. They tend to be more overweight than the average person in the United States, and they you know eat a lot of sugar. And so, like, and if you haven't run for most of your adult life, and then immediately you have to start running again,
like every day,
you're screwed. You know, and so you have to kind of think about like the shape you're in now definitely affects how you would survive in an apocalyptic future.
To like use blunt force trauma enough to kill another human being.
It's really hard.
I'm
not that I would know.
Yeah, definitely. And also, these things seem to be far more resilient than the average human too.
Yeah,
like
because they don't feel pain.
Well, maybe they do, but they're just so pissed off that they're just like, ah! Like you literally have to deal a killing blow in order for them to not get back up.
Yeah,
and that can be pretty hard, because
especially if they're already dead.
A person can be like knocked out with a head blow, but if like the physicality of you getting knocked out isn't present anymore, man, like to actually kill someone like that, you have to be either much larger and get a really good blow, or very skilled in order to do that. You can't be like, I think the two groups of people that would die instantly in a zombie apocalypse would be, I'm sorry, small, scrawny people, and then very unathletic people.
Yeah.
And then the middle ground would have a chance to survive. You don't have to be an athlete to be able to like run and outsmart somebody or use a baseball bat as a weapon.
Yeah.
But you have to have something for you. Like
you need something that's going to keep you alive, you know? I mean, and if it could be that you're a doctor and people want to protect you, but you know, usually you have to have something. I'm screwed because I'm an actor and no one will want to protect me.
Whoa! What if they're just like, act? They point a gun at you. Act now.
And then I live the longest. I'm actually the cure. Or if you're the cure, then people will.
Yeah, turns out
die for you.
Turns out laughter was the cure the whole time.
Laughter, French. It was the friends we made along the way.
Oh my
god! So I want to talk about drugs and alcohol because, along with the sugar thing, having drugs and alcohol in your system would make it significantly harder for you to.
And there would be an abundance of that.
Oh, yeah.
Because when somebody goes into panic and getting survival, most people do not grab alcohol, and most people also don't realize how many prescription drugs are in pharmacies at any given time.
Yeah.
And it's dangerous to think about because, like, you can go in, and unless you're like a pharmacist or it's clearly labeled and you know what the label means, you're just grabbing a handful of drugs and stuff like that. Like the comment I made earlier where they're just like, they're in the market and they're looking at the wall of alcohol and he grabs one and the dad's like, no, if you're going to take anything, take the better, like, and he grabs like 6 of them because it's just like, sure, there's an abundance of that.
Yeah.
Selena.
But it doesn't help at all, you know?
It does not help at all. It doesn't provide any, like, sorts. Like, the alcohol would honestly be more of a detriment. And
it would be so easy, too, to get trapped in that. Like, living in a hopeless world and getting trapped in, like, the addiction of drugs and alcohol.
Yeah, same with that. Like, Selena uses, when it's first shown that she has basically a bag full of prescription drugs.
Yeah.
It mentions that she actually is, like, a licensed pharmacist, so she knows what it does.
Yeah.
The first time they use it is literally, like, they're traveling, and they want to... and they're like, oh man, she fell asleep pretty easily. And they're like, it's because I took like sleeping pills.
Yeah.
And so everybody except for one guy takes sleeping pills, which I'm like, you idiots. What? They're sleeping basically out in the open, but they turn out to be fine. It's one of those moments where they're like far enough away from civilization that the zombies probably weren't there. I don't know. That's not hard for me to believe.
Yeah.
But it shows that it's like there's an abundance of this stuff now, but not an abundance of like water.
Yeah.
And everything like that. Like if you
That's why they drink soda too, because there's not an abundance of water.
Like they live in an apartment high rise, and it's like, well, 8 days ago our water ran out, and I put all these buckets out on the roof, and it turns out first time in like England history, like 9 days without any water, or like rain or anything like that. Because you always see these survival movies where it's just like, oh, this person managed to catch all this water with in buckets, or like somebody was able to figure out like, yeah, this is a do-it-yourself moisture catcher out of a tarp. And you get there, and the dad's like, yeah, nothing works. It's like, nothing works.
It's so I love this movie because it showed like things that you don't necessarily think about in these survival situations.
Yeah.
Like only being able to drink soda because you don't have clean water. I did want to mention another thing where. When they meet the soldiers, and there's that one guy who's actually the best soldier of them all, and he says that, it was normal to not have humans on the earth. So what if this is just nature, like, correcting itself and getting back to normalcy?
Yeah,
what if we
he
are
basically
the
was
disease,
getting like philosophical about it, like, for the entirety of the planet of the Earth, humans have only existed for a small fraction of it. So it's like, what really is normal? Like normal for us in the span of our 70 to 90 years, this might not be normal, but like in the grand scheme of things,
Mm-hmm.
does it really matter?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So I wanted to, of course, mention the animal rights thing.
Yeah.
Where they're experimenting on monkeys because these monkeys have this disease.
Yeah.
And, PETA comes in.
Yeah,
so we don't know if it's PETA.
Yeah, beginning of the movie, the characters literally aren't named. They are just known as activists and scientists. They come in, and you look at this facility, and it obviously looks like they're experimenting on monkeys. There's one monkey strapped to a table watching weird videos and stuff like that. And these activists come in, take a bunch of pictures, and they're planning on freeing the monkeys. The scientist comes in, and they're basically like really pissed. One guy looks like he's about to beat them to death, and he's like, listen, you don't understand. They're infected. These things are highly contagious. If you let them out, bad things are going to happen. And he basically, it's just like, it's incurable at the moment. And these activists are just like, well, you torturer, or like, I don't even know, I forget what they call him, but they just call him a monster, essentially. And literally the scientist, even though, like, yes, he technically was experimenting and in a sense kind of torturing these monkeys, but all these monkeys were not normal cognitive creatures.
Yeah.
They were bloodthirsty. Like, they open up one cage and immediately that's when goes down.
Yeah.
And so,
and
like,
then she immediately turns.
Yeah,
It's just a spiral.
They before they even kill the monkey, she is turned, and they're like, what? And then she does a whole spray vomit on the next guy. And then that's literally when it's like 28 days later. Because that was ground zero. If they had just, like, I'm not saying, I think it kind of speaks for an unfortunate thing of this movie. If they hadn't done anything,
it wouldn't have happened. Probably,
but
we don't know,
because like it obviously seemed that like they found these monkeys infected with this. So like,
and they were trying to find a cure too.
Yeah, they weren't doing it in the most ethical way.
No,
but then also, unfortunately, if you look at medical history, a lot of medical breakthroughs weren't done in the most ethical ways either.
Yeah.
So I'm not condoning that behavior, but it's kind of interesting to be like, if these activists didn't break in, didn't do this stuff, would society have crumbled?
Yeah.
But but like, it's also like, it was in the UK, and that's where the original outbreak went. And they talked briefly about how like there's how like New York had some outbreaks and everything like that. So does that mean somebody from the UK traveled there? Was there a different outbreak? It doesn't go into details because the characters themselves don't know the details. So why would they give us the details?
And there's a lot of animal rights activists today, and you obviously shouldn't abuse animals unnecessarily. Sure. You shouldn't, you shouldn't test products on animals that could potentially hurt them.
Yeah.
You should be respectful to animals, but on another hand, if
something like that happened, because it's like, I know there's even a subsect of animal rights activists. They're not even an animal, who are just like, who get upset when people talk about like getting rid of mosquitoes. Mosquitoes, which you literally scientifically can't find a beneficial purpose for them existing on the planet.
Yeah.
And mosquitoes are, like, below rats, one of the highest, like, contagion spreaders in the world. But, like, we're like, you know what? Like, what if we did this? And people are like, no, that's killing an entire species. Why? Because this species is killing a lot of other things.
Yeah.
But in that sense, where it's like, if something like this happened, or is happening, who knows how many actual diseases like the government found.
Area 51, baby.
I'm not even going as far as conspiracy theory with that or anything like that. I'm just saying there can't be a time where like some scientists found some crazy extinct and everywhere part of the world disease in some remote areas, especially during the big travel booms and archaeological digs and everything like that.
Yeah.
From the late 19th to the mid 20th century and everything like that. You can't tell me where it's like they go in there and they like find some sort of disease, or they find some sort of animal that's a carrier for disease. Maybe they're not affected by it.
Yeah.
And you're like, and then maybe not cover up is a bad word, but being like, no, we're going to take these things in and be like, how deadly is this? Because the researchers that found them and had 10 minutes of contact with them are deathly sick right now. So what would happen if one of these got into like the nearby city?
Yeah.
Or something like that. So it really begs the question: is like they definitely weren't the bad guys, but they were trying to do good through doing some questionable things.
Yeah, for sure. And it's such a gray area because these activists thought they were doing the right thing, and it ended up they were not doing the right thing.
Yeah.
And a lot of the time, sometimes we think we're doing the right thing when we're not doing the right thing. And they had this self-righteous thing of like the scientists warned them, like, don't open those cages.
He was begging them.
Yeah.
Like the guy basically was on his hands and knees with like fear. Like if I was in those activist position and like this guy is like, no, it's dangerous, highly contagious. That's why we have them in here. I would give a second and be like, okay,
let's think about
Mr.
this.
Leader activist. I forget your name, but maybe this guy who is basically crying and on his knees right now begging us,
Yeah.
maybe he's not lying, because most human beings don't do that, have this visceral reaction while lying.
Yeah.
Unless he's a fantastic liar.
Yeah.
But then you look at the dude and this isn't an attack against the actor they have him, but he was kind of like this, like, you could read him like a book Weasley kind of guy. He's not hiding anything. He's not a highly charismatic person that lies about this stuff. He's just a scientist who spends his entire life indoors, probably preventing diseases for years.
Yeah. And, you know, it's unfortunate that in order to, gosh, I hate saying it because it makes me feel so gross, but it's unfortunate that you have, like, people, if they want a good outcome of something, they have to do immoral things. Does that make sense? You know, they had to experiment on those monkeys to get a vaccine. And if they got a vaccine and it broke out, then they could have probably resolved it really quickly. It's, you know, it's such a tricky topic to talk about because, I mean, I spray pest control. And, you know, I just spray it around houses. If I see a wasp nest, I douse it in the pest control.
If you see a kiddie pool,
yeah, you know, no, but like if I see anthills, I spray them. And, you know, there's some people that disagree with me in doing that. And I put like mice bait and vole bait out into yards because, you know, they're pests and they could potentially carry diseases that could make people very sick. And so it's like, you know, you have to decide which life is more important, the human or the animal. And I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that, you know, 10 times out of 10, usually human life is more important. That doesn't mean you go around killing animals and doing things to animals, but it's very tricky. I would have rather had them keep the monkeys in the cages than have a zombie outbreak.
Yes. You're right about that in that scenario, yes.
You look like you disagree with me.
I don't disagree with you, but it's just such a heavy topic to be like...
I mean, you shouldn't be a dick to animals. Like,
I think, obviously, like how that... Because of consumerism, let's go back to consumerism, and how corporations are like... It's atrocious what they do to... Especially like cows and chickens. Cows, chickens, and pigs. The three big... protein meat producers in the world. And it's like, you look at these farms that produce... thousands of them, millions of them a year, and it's just like, oh man, I just read an article where like a bunch of about how they kill hundreds of thousands of roosters every year because they're like, we don't need this many roosters. And it's just like, oh, what? Well,
it's you know, you see the videos of the people going into those places, and it makes you feel sick. And you know, I don't disagree with eating meat. I disagree with how a lot of meat producing companies treat their animals to get the meat.
Yeah, and if you guys have any complaints, I will post Zach's information.
Okay, cool. Sounds good.
I say we move on to the next topic.
Yeah, it's a hard topic.
Even harder topic.
This is an even harder topic to talk about.
So just as a warning, this is this movie in general just has a bunch of sexual, not even just themes, just blatant in your face.
Flat out, yeah.
Like sexual, you could like
sexual assault and rape.
Yeah, definitely.
So trigger warning.
They're also not afraid to do nudity in it. Like literally, the first scene you see the main character, he's naked. But that's actually the lesser of all the things.
Yeah. So, for context, if you haven't seen the movie, they get to this military base, and it's a bunch of these soldiers.
It's 9 soldiers who have basically made this like 4-story mansion, a bunker. They've laid down landmines, they have floodlights, they are armed to the teeth with machine. The first actual guns you see into this, not only are the guns, they are just like military grade. They have this place fortified, and it's 9 men, and basically, you get the feeling that several of these men are unhinged, and then the leader, the colonel played by, or captain, whatever his position is, played by Chris Eccleston, basically seems like a really reasonable guy for the first like 15-20 minutes that you're talking to him. He's talking about how like, well, we may not seem like much, but we're here. There's clean bed sheets. There's plenty of food to go around, and everything like that. But basically, it turns into where he reveals that the reason why they sent out the message, the radio signal in the first place, is because he caught one of his men attempting to commit suicide. They said that what's the point in fighting for a non-existent future? What can 9 men holed up in a bunker achieve to make in a future? So within these 4 weeks, people got so depressed that they were going to kill themselves. So the only thing that the captain could think of to prevent his men from just one by one doing so, because I would assume in that scenario, after the first one does, everyone else who is on the edge
would at least have suicidal thoughts.
I would think like 6 of them would.
Yeah.
So he basically is like, okay, we're going to bring people in, and I promise you guys, you will have life. You will have. He promised that. He said he's like, I promised them women.
Yeah.
And when he says that to Jim, the main character, is like, what? He's like, he was going to kill himself. So I promised them women. I turned on the radio broadcast, and you guys came, and like several levels of messed up.
Yeah.
Because he's like, at this moment, Jim like they try to escape. They don't let them. There's 9 physically trained, well-armed men there versus at this point the dad had died, so it was just Jim, I think she was 16-year-old girl, and Selena, and so Jim gets separated from them, and basically they're like they're like ripping her clothes off, making her dress up in a fancy red dress that happened to be in the house, and they are preparing to have like seemingly one by one their way with her. With
both of them.
It was with both of them. It seemed a lot of them leaned far closer to Selena since Selena was an adult woman, but it was very obviously insinuated that a couple of them probably wouldn't have had any issue with the young girl either.
No.
And so this really goes down to like the breakdown of humanity in this thing. When you bring people to the brink or even past the brink of despair, what they are willing to do to feel a sense of, maybe normalcy isn't the right word, but to feel the sense of...
Feel something.
Yeah, because for every single day for 4 weeks, they've basically been killing people.
Yeah.
And like, they're soldiers, but it's obviously different because like you're killing people and it's like, well, I can go home, go down to the pub, have a drink, see my aunts, cousins, whatever. But for them, there's no more home. Their home is this place with 8 other guys who they probably would die for before this, and they love as brothers in a certain sense. But like when that gets broken down, and then they're just like sick of seeing each other every single day, they don't see anybody new, and then it's like,
and there's literally like there's no women, and it's just so gross.
Yeah.
My first thought is like, he's gonna kill himself, and to promise him women. To other than
here's my thing. Even at the end of everything, after what he does in the movie and what it contextualizes that he did pre the movie, that the captain very much seems like he's a person that does genuinely care for his platoon. That he was put in an impossible situation. I'm not saying this was right or anything, but I can imagine that wasn't his first argument, his first go-to. I think he probably found the guy suicidal, like attempting to kill himself, talked him out of it, but wasn't able to fully talk him out of it. Like he probably was still afraid, and so he probably used every argument he could, and he was just like, okay, we'll bring some people here, do this, but then maybe the promise of just having more people come, I have a feeling it may have just been like, it couldn't have been the first argument, because you meet his character, and his character is fairly well spoken, his character is fairly thoughtful, and so he couldn't. Even though he allowed this stuff to happen, like you saw, if you looked at the look in his face and at the tone of his voice when he's just like, okay, we're taking him away, he seemed pretty somber about it. He was like, I truly wish I didn't have to do this, but I'm doing this because we have deemed this necessary.
Yeah, but it comes to a point where it's like, he promises them women, but, he had the choice, he had the opportunity to be like, but, like, we're going to get people to come and we're going to make a society, but... cannot rape women.
Two things that I want to point out that was one of the plot points in this. 8 out of those 9 men genuinely thought that the world was over, that the entire world was like that. While the one sergeant was just like, listen, we're on an island nation. Like, and if the outbreak started here, like, it's not, it may go across the river and everything, but it's going to stop a whole lot here. Why aren't we seeing anybody? It's because they've quarantined us. Yeah. Like that whole thing. They've quarantined us. And every time he brings up, everyone's just calling him stupid and everything like that. And it turns out to be a plot point that's actually like, they see one of the turnarounds for Jim later in the movie is that he sees a jet flying in the air, flying over. And that makes it so Jim has the energy, the courage to be able to stand up to these guys because he knows that it's not the end anymore. Yeah. But 8 out of these 9 guys, including there's the only real standouts is the captain, and there's the one guy who I will call the real asshole of the group, who seems to be like he's always standing in the front. He's like the lead jock and everything like that. And I guess there's the guy who was kind of the village idiot / cook, but he wasn't really he seemed more to be like kind of guy that if you told him to do anything, he would. He also didn't seem to be a guy, if you looked at the last scenes, jumping at the gun to participate in the in the raping.
Yeah, I'm just appalled that it was 1 out of 9 that was like against.
It's true. I just like, I don't know enough about human psychology, but you see people, if you experience the forms of isolation, forms of depression, it messes with you.
Yeah.
Like I've watched things where like people do experiments where they spend like 3 days in an isolation room, and by by like hour 13, they think it's day 2, and 2 they're like, what's going on? What do I do? What do I do to find what is this? And they start mumbling and talk. Like it sounds like they're madmen. So imagine this: they're not 100% isolated because they're with other people. But like these people, some of them aren't the friendliest. Some of them obviously clash in ideals and backgrounds and everything like that. But like, and they're in a horribly depressing situation where it's just like every moving being that they see is one they have to gun down. And so like it's like a breakdown of that is just so like, because it all compounds of what we've been talking about. Compounds of these people are technically still alive, so you're just killing a bunch of different people. Another one, it happens so quickly because the infection, decline of a society, everything like that. And then another thing where it's just like, I wonder what exactly their lives were before the whole thing. Obviously they were soldiers before the whole thing started, but like what I think a lot of people don't understand, like if you take away like some people make jokes about it, but like for some people, if you take away even some simple comforts, like oh man, my bed has to be a particular softness or else I'll become a madman or something like that. Like imagine taking literally having no choice and having everything of that taken away. If you're irritable when something small like that happens, imagine what would happen if you were 100% forced to live in just a situation. Where like you have no real comfort. And you don't even have comfort of like being like, well, at least we have slightly better food, because obviously they have both rotten food and a bad cook cooking for them as well. And I can only imagine eating crappy food or eating the same, because they probably have cans of freeze-dried eggs or whatever it is. They probably were eating that for like 2 weeks straight. Can you imagine what that can take, not only physically but psychologically?
I do. I agree with you. I think though I've always had this thought. I was like, what is the worst thing a human can do? And I was thinking it, and I was like, well, for me, it's between rape and murder. And then I'm like, okay, but there are justifiable causes for murder, like self-defense. Like, if someone is attacking you that has a zombie virus and they're technically sick and not dead, like, I think that's okay to kill them. But I don't think that there's ever a justifiable cause for rape. There's never a cause for rape that is justifiable, because rape is so predatory.
If you kill someone, they're dead. They don't have trauma. They don't have repercussions and everything like that. If you even just sexual assault and not full on rape and everything like that, that has lasting repercussions for the victim in every single case. Whether those repercussions are sometimes even years down the road, you have weird thoughts or ideas that you remember that, and it gives you chills. 2, you literally having to go to mountains of therapy and you can't maintain a relationship because as soon as somebody tries to physically touch you, you wince, freak out, do all that stuff. And so I think I've always considered sexual crimes to be highest.
And
it's
considered that in prison too.
Well, too. It's always my funny thing where it's just like, here's some prison justice, because like in some of those cases where you're talking about justifiable murder and people can get mad at me or not, but it's like somebody's just going to rape somebody and they get thrown in prison for it. I'm like, you literally ruined this person's life. It's like, I really don't give a shit if somebody shanks you in prison or beats you to death in prison.
I was going to say,
some guy who's in there for 200 years for murder, he's like, I must do justice. He's like, he's prison Batman, except kills.
Well, I was going to say, like, if the choice is raping someone or you dying,
but if there's
die.
But here's the thing. If society suddenly stopped and all sense of rules, not just government, but all of rules and everything that you lived by before.
Well, there's nothing holding
anything back. Even if you aren't a monster, there's just some things where it's just like because we have a lot of, especially within the last, I'd say 10 years, we've had a lot of societal norms change. Like even something as simple as how people talk to each other. Like some people may say some stuff that nowadays is just like considered offensive, do all the offensive, maybe even low bearing, like racist or something like that, that wouldn't have been considered that 15 plus years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But because society norms have changed and there's that pressure, some people have been changing that. But like, if suddenly society just got destroyed, eradicated, people will go to what their bare instincts are. And there are people whose bare instincts that are like, they automatically sexualize women.
Mm-hmm.
They automatically are like, well, you know what? There hasn't been like those. Who knows? One of those guys, those soldiers, might have been like, well, there wasn't a weekend where I didn't go down to the club or the pub and everything like that, and I didn't have a girl in my bed and everything like that.
Yeah.
Now suddenly, 1 month later, he's been sleeping in a house with a bunch of dudes. He's malnourished, sweaty, disgusting. He's killed hundreds of people, and he's like, you know what I do right now? Yeah, Captain, I'll stay here. I won't kill myself or mutiny if you bring me a woman.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, yeah, that'd be pretty nice. And he's only thinking about the good times, probably mostly with like, probably like mostly just with two drunk people in the bed having sex and everything like that. And he's like, it'll be like that, right?
Yeah.
No, there's one woman you're literally
there's
forcing.
like that block where they're thinking
because they don't think of the whole picture. They're thinking about how great, because they think in this particular scenario, not every single case of rape, obviously, but in this particular scenario, most of these men have come to the conclusion that if they have sex with this woman, that something about their lives will be fixed. They will return to normalcy. I guess you can say that a lot of people genuinely think that their lives will be fixed if they get into a relationship or get married. That definitely, like, because thinking of this psychologically, because, like, I'm not saying all those men were at one point reasonable. Probably, maybe most of them weren't reasonable at one point. But like, the sexual crime of it at all, it, like, goes down to that basically primal instinct, where it's like, what do base level mammals, like, what does every mammal do? Mm-hmm. Eat, sleep, and like, that's basically the thing. If you're eating right, eating healthy, okay. If you're sleeping right, sleeping healthy, okay. Well, you also like the idea of, like, they also, part of them probably convince themselves of being like
justifying it to themselves.
We're like
I need this, I deserve this,
or like
days.
You know, we haven't seen a live woman in who knows how long.
Mm-hmm.
What if there's like no one? Do we need to impregnate to save the world? And there's some people who probably would literally convince themselves of that in that scenario.
And a lot of rapists do convince themselves of what they do is right.
Yeah,
like they go through these mental gymnastics of, like,
it's probably under the same mind Olympics, where it's just like, well, I thought she was coming on to me.
Yeah.
Or, well, what she was wearing. It's like, and it's like
stuff.
This is, and it's like, no.
It's like, no, like, you're wrong. Like,
no.
And a lot of rapists do that because that's how they can do it.
Did you hear? Yeah. Did you hear what they were saying? They were saying no, and they were hitting you. I'm pretty sure it doesn't matter if they were wearing a low top, or in this case, it doesn't matter if you think you're going to save the whole world by.
And it doesn't matter if you're
going to save the whole world by impregnating two women.
That like, without their consent, like, and I do believe that is how rapists rape. Is they have to do that in their head in order to do it, because no sane person, no person that is, like, genuinely compassionate
or logical
and logical would ever rape someone. And so they have to justify it to themselves. And we've seen a lot of court cases today where judges are, like, justifying it. They're like, well, he's young. You know, she might have been giving off weird signals. I know it's
bad for me. It might have been bad for me. The one that happened like 4 or 5 years ago with that guy who was going to go to college.
Yeah, for swimming. I can't remember his name.
Yeah, but then the judge let him off with like 6 months in prison because he's like, well, I don't want to ruin his life. He ruined a woman's life. If that group of people didn't walk past that dumpster and like and saw him doing that, who knows what would have happened to her?
Yeah.
And like
those people probably wouldn't have believed her.
Those people showed so much restraint not to just kill. I would imagine, because like if I was in that scenario, I'd be like, what? Like, I would probably bash that guy's head against the dumpster.
Yeah.
And be like...
Well, I mean, when he was killing them in the movie, I was like, good. Kill him.
Yeah. At the end of the movie, a cathartic release is that Jim goes Rambo, using the combination of there not being much light or electricity and a thunderstorm. And he also releases...
Yeah, he's very wiry. Like, I was impressed.
And he also releases one infected within the building. So most of the people are dealing with the infected, but the lead... I'm going to call him the lead jock soldier, is holding Selena and being like, yeah, don't worry, I'm going to protect you, and we're going to do this, go to a countryside cabin and everything. Yeah. Then he jumps behind him and is like, surprise, And basically it's just like they're having this fight, and it's just like bashing his head against the wall, and then there's the whole thumb in the eyes thing, which this movie goes full on. It's not just him pressing it a little bit and then getting the hands pushed away. No, that's how he kills this dude. And you're like, yes. Yes.
Yeah, well, it's just...
When you're watching some... Because, like, those guys rapists. Are pure evil.
Yeah.
Like
it doesn't matter what they were before.
They threw out their humanity. Mm-hmm. They threw out society, mm-hmm. and within a month they threw this all out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how do you expect to have a society back if you're just going to rape people?
And here's the thing, because like, if society gets reassembled and everything like that, how would they be held accountable? Mm-hmm. Like, you could throw all the accusations.
Well, they're probably going to be the ones holding people accountable because they're the soldiers.
They're probably going to be the guards of communities.
Yeah, exactly.
It would make the most logical sense to get people that have weapon and military training
to be the protection.
Yeah.
And what are you going to do without protection in this world?
Oh man, this is bringing up a whole bunch of like actual political things happening today.
Oh yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah.
But anyways, rape is bad.
I did want to mention one last thing. Let's make this quick. But when
this is going to be 2 hours.
When they're about to rape them, and then she's like, "Can you guys leave the room? We need to get ready and stuff."
Oh.
And then she like brings the pills over to her, and she's like, "Hey, take these." She's like, "Are you trying to kill me?" She's like, "No, I'm trying to make you not
This is
there."
Selena bringing the young girl Hannah the pills. So like in that sort of scenario where it's like, I guess you could try like. Overdosing on pills is actually harder than a lot of people realize, mm-hmm. especially if you don't have like a stimulant with it. That's why a lot of people drink alcohol with it, because alcohol stimulates doesn't inhibit. It makes it so that pills work better when you consume them. That's why when people overdose on pills, because they took a handful and they drank an entire glass.
Yeah.
But basically, like, yeah, she was just like, I just want you to not care. And the soldiers freak out about it and everything like that. Selena couldn't see a way out of this scenario.
Yeah.
And so she just thought it was going to happen, and so she wanted Hannah.
She wanted to make it better, and she like
thinking about it in their situation, in their thought process, what were their options?
Yeah,
like
they couldn't fight them off.
Here's the thing, like Selena was a good killing machine, but like these men were several inches taller than her. Trained military soldiers, and she was
guns.
They were like, even in just hand-to-hand combat, mm-hmm. she was at a disadvantage.
Yeah,
like,
and I think she honestly just wanted to protect her, because
she like, because like Hannah throughout the entire movie was kind of this pull thread of being like hope, like she is still part of the world before, and hope mm-hmm. that the world after will be a sense of good and normalcy, because she's still a young teenage girl. That even though she is obviously depressed in this whole scenario and everything, she still has hope, because she has young young blood,
youthful vibrance.
She has that youth blood.
Yeah, but I just thought I'd mention that a little bit, because that
was definitely an interesting line.
Because it's just they were put in a really situation.
You don't see that,
and they had to make a choice.
You don't see that because, like, in a lot of stuff that you see, especially recently, in those sort of scenarios, they either 100% try to fight tooth and nail to get out of there, mm-hmm. and either succeed or die in the process of getting out, or one of them dies in the process, mm-hmm. or it would open the door, and then suddenly they both would have killed themselves.
Yeah,
and it's kind of interesting to see, to be like, they're giving into it because they don't want to die. They don't, because like the soldiers, to be perfectly honest, I don't think would have killed them if they tried fighting. They would have horribly hurt them.
Yeah.
And then still raped them.
Yeah.
So she's just like, we're taking the lesser of like 15 possible evils right now.
Yeah.
And if you're high while doing it, and you kind of don't remember or kind of don't know what exactly is going on, mm-hmm. then it'll still be awful.
Yeah.
But it'll be half a degree less awful.
Yeah. So what do you guys think? Did we miss anything in the movie? Did we, what are your guys' opinions on this stuff? And we will leave with a short musical break, and we'll be right back with a moral dilemma. And we are back. Thank you guys for listening and joining us again. So, I wanted to ask a more simpler, less, harsh moral dilemma this time, because this is a very heavy episode and heavy topics that we talked about. This was brought up in the movie.
Yeah.
Where would you rather read a book that had never been written or watch a movie that has never been shot?
What do you mean by read? You mean a book that hasn't been read yet?
That hasn't been written or read. Like, you're the first one ever.
You are the first person to experience
mm-hmm.
that thing, and then the same for the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Well, It's kind of interesting to think, because if I think about the stupid logic part of my brain is like, well, if I'm watching the movie as one of the first people, then it's probably the first editing of a movie, so it might be crappy. But it would also be
you're not wrong.
It would also be pretty interesting to see, because like something that pops into my mind when I think about it is that there are a lot of PG-13 or lower rated movies that starred the actor Robin Williams in it that were originally R-rated. Because the original script allowed him to just be himself. And Robin Williams, despite the fact he was in a lot of kid-friendly movies, he was a sailor when it comes to his language and everything like that. And there are several movies I hear about that they actually put out test screenings of it as an R rating, and they were like, nope, this isn't going to work. And so they re-edited it into a PG-13 movie. So in a scenario like that, I would have loved to see one of those movies is R-rated, to be like, hey, you know that movie you guys are talking about? It made like $200 million in the box office this last weekend. It's PG-13. Guess what it was really about? And like you can tell here, and here what they cut out.
Yeah.
So that sort of scenario, I think I would tend to lean more towards a movie, because if you are the first person, I would think that it would have to be one of the first like test viewings where they're before any final edits were done, or even. Like sometimes if those test viewings are big enough of flops, they'll do reshoots and too. Whereas with a book, I guess if you're the first reading it raw, unbound, just on printed paper and everything like that, there could be a lot of stuff that is too much fluff, too much anything like that. Like even the best writers out there like have to send their first versions of a book to
the
editor 5 or 6 times. Because sometimes it's like, yeah, we need you to, like, is 700 pages really necessary for one book? Can we split this into 2 books? Or can you cut this entire fluff section out of it? Or do this? I would much rather experience that movie, because, like, a cinema experience, you can also... Books, you have your imagination, but the cinema experience, you have all of what the raw director, the raw editing and everything like that is in front of you and presented into you, where the book, the first book, yes, you have your imagination, and sometimes people's imagination, probably mine as well, are far more vivid than what you can see on screen. But it's always nice to have that visual aspect as well. For me.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm more of a visual person, so I think I'd rather see the movie. I think it also depends on the content and like what I'm interested in.
This is kind of an odd question, because
it's sort of a open-ended question.
It's like, what would it be like if you were the very first person to ever read, like, when did it come out? The first Harry Potter book, like 99 it came out, or 2000, something around there.
Yeah, something around there.
What can you imagine being the first person to ever read it? Like the guy she originally submitted the first half of the first book to while she was broke and penniless, and being like the dude in the office reading through this like a couple hundred pages and being like, yeah, you know, this seems kind of interesting. Let's give her a shot.
Like, I think she was rejected a few times.
She was rejected a few times too. So imagine. Can you imagine being one of the guys thinking about that and being like, yeah, I kind of read a story like a couple years ago and we rejected it. It was similar to this. I'm not sure who, but it was only like half the story. Interesting.
Yeah, but tell me what you guys think. What are the circumstances that you would want to either read a book that has not been written or watch a movie that has not been shot? You can let us know on our Twitter and Instagram. Twitter is Zaki the Zombie. Instagram is Feed Don't Eat Your Brain. You can also follow us on Fullerton Horseman on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. And you can also email us with any questions, comments, concerns, suggestions at feeddon'teatyourbrain@gmail.com, as well as please subscribe and share. Thank you guys for listening. Have a good night, day, whatever time you're listening to. All right, bye-bye.
See ya.